Just take a second to get started there. Okay, I think that's going through. Okay, let me just turn the volume down on that, otherwise that will be very confusing for us. Very good. Okay. Well, lovely to have you here. And where are you connecting from? Where are you based?
So I'm based at the moment in just in North London, but I'm between Spain and London, so between the two.
North London's between Spain and London, is it?
Between Spain and London. North London is the beginning of the world for me, and then everything else falls off.
And whereabouts in North London?
Oh, just off Camden, in fact, just off Camden. So kind of north.
Oh, just a tiny bit North London.
Yeah, a tiny bit of North London. That's right.
Tiny bit North London, because I used to be in Mill Hill East, and then we moved up to Hemel Hempstead. So
Lovely.
North London's the area we know. So it is 6:30. Let's get started properly. Good evening and welcome everyone joining me this evening for this webinar. Let me just adjust my camera height and chair height a little bit. Welcome. I'm really delighted to have you here and join me as I get this chance to talk to and interview someone I've actually wanted to have quite a long chat with for quite a long time. I don't know why we haven't done this anyway outside of doing a webinar. And that is Fiyaz Mughal. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? I just want to check that.
Absolutely brilliant. Fantastic.
Okay, good. Fantastic. So Fiyaz, I think we first talked on the phone when you were thinking about taking the training, and I'll tell you what, it struck me then what a enthusiastic and positive person Fiyaz is. That energy came across in the phone call, and at pretty much every interaction since, that has come across. And it's just, and even Fabian, it's, oh God, what a lovely guy to talk to. It's such an upbeat energy. Maybe we're very sensitive to that and notice it, but certainly that's very much the impression I had, and your passion to do this and to help people, but also this enthusiasm. So lovely that I've got the chance to talk with you. I want to interview you about your enthusiasm. I'm a big proponent of enthusiasm. It's something to be nurtured, cultivated, respected, encouraged, and find out about your journey into becoming a therapist, deciding to train with the college in this particular model, the impact that has had on your journey as a therapist, and then find out about your current practice now. And I believe you've got a case study to share. Is that correct, Fiyaz?
Right, absolutely right. Absolutely right. I picked on one of the easier case studies because there's more difficult ones, but let's start with a kind of semi-difficult case study, not too difficult. So yeah, definitely going through that in detail, Mark.
Fantastic. Okay, well, so that's and everybody, you can pop in your chat there, a few people saying hi to you there. So yeah, well, welcome everyone joining us. So let's go back. Let's find out a little bit where are you from originally, and a little bit of your journey, because it's very interesting. I'm sure people want to know about these, what OBE stands for, how you got the OBE. I put you down as, I think I tried to find some description, social cohesion entrepreneur.
Yes, yes.
I thought social entrepreneur sounded a bit too kind of like, Dragon's Den-ish.
Yeah.
Stephen Bartlett, and I didn't really think that was quite you. So.
Yeah.
Social cohesion entrepreneur. Do you like that title?
I love that. I'm hanging on to that because that's the most accurate somebody's ever used, right? Because they put social entrepreneur, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't sell goods I don't sell goods. I sell services, right? So you're absolutely right. So thank you for that. I mean, first of all, great description, hanging on to that. And I guess let me tell you about my journey here to where I am as a therapist slash Hypno-CBT therapist. And, my journey has been one where I pretty much worked about 30 years after graduating from university. I started my degree. It's interesting. I started my degree in neuroscience, the brain and spinal cord. I did my degree at University College London. And the reason was I would always had a fascination with the brain. I'd always kind of in some way been fascinated because I was kind of suffering a little bit from stress. I was a hard worker, constantly in my books, and the stress impact. I thought, it drove me in the direction of trying to understand more about my own nervous system. So I did a degree in neuroscience, but interestingly,
As a mature student, is that? It sounds like what?
no, I did that in 92, my first degree as neuroscience, my first initial degree. So that was at UCL. But in a way, I look back now and I realize it was a bit of karma driving me in that direction, because in my journey, in that process, I did have anxiety, quite really significant anxiety towards my end of my third year, my final year. And, you know, like any other student, I was unfortunately down, not so much down lectures at that point, but down the pub, going between lectures and drinking and having fun. And it made my anxiety worse. And I kind of thought from there, did my degree, but I then went into the social sector. And I spent 30 years working around social cohesion and some very difficult issues. Now, I outlined this journey because I didn't realize why I kept getting drawn to difficult issues. I kept getting drawn to excitement. And just hang on to that, because I kept going into things that people would not go into because they're difficult. So the work I did was bringing conflicting communities where they had social tensions together, working on some really complex issues, working on extremism. My God, what a nightmare of an issue to deal with. But I worked for 20 years and I was always in this conflicted, high anxiety, low energy phase. And I kind of look back in that period of time, and the more I got older, the more I started to realize, hold on, there is something here that has happened to me early on in my life. And something has happened early, and because I'm having these long-term impacts of this kind of going into conflict, going into high anxiety, thriving with the energy of the anxiety and the highs and lows, but it wasn't what everyone else was doing. They were kind of living in the window of tolerance phase, right? They were living in that window quite happily, most people. And here was I going way beyond my limits of tolerance. And what was that behavior about? And it led me in a way to reflect. And I did a 3-year therapy course after 30 years in the social sector. I did 3 years in counseling and suddenly realized, hold on, the trauma that I had suffered as a 1-year-old baby, having been kicked out of Uganda by Idi Amin, that ejection, that living in military camps in the UK, that sense of dislocation for my family had set in a form of an early dysregulation for me, an early sense of dysregulation, where I was kind of, in a way, exposed to excitement, anxiety, high themes of energy, low drops, and that's the starting phase of my early developmental life. Now,
I mean, it could equally be a passion against injustice and a campaign for tolerance and harmony and people to get along. I mean, that's my look at it straight away.
It is, and actually it is, because, and it very much is, and I will go bring this into the work today, because in a way we can't get away from the values we have. We can't get away from what drives us. And in a way, I'm going to be talking about OCD, and actually OCD is one symptom of something that really latches onto our core drivers and what drives us, our value systems, what brings us here today to help people, to possibly heal people, to be part of their healing journey. It's the values. I mean, your values come through in everything you do, Mark. You know, that's the kind of things we all do. It's kind of, we're here to try to make the world a better place or drive things better. I want to go on.
Let me just, because I nearly heard you about to kind of psychopathologize your heroic actions and campaigns and impact that you've had. And I'm not going to support you in that. You know, I mean, I think, you know, I understand, and it's true. We look at people who do accomplish great stuff, and then we can see like all these drivers behind it that maybe aren't so healthy, and yet at the same time they have impact. You know, so
I absolutely appreciate that. I think I would agree with you. I would agree with you in a lot of what you say in that. And I guess what I'm saying is the drivers were there. The direction was probably more than likely there because of my value systems. The up lows were just the impact of a number of traumatic events in my life. So the drivers were already in place. You know, you can't change the kind of value system which is inbuilt into a person over time. So I guess it was the dysregulation was more along the trauma that happened along my journey. I think that's
I'm hearing that journey and the choices you made were it wasn't such a positive experience for you in terms of you. It was you there was a dysregulation in the choices along those values. Yeah,
spot on, spot on.
Yeah.
And so the counseling journey gave me the chance to start to detach from, to some degree, that high stress environment through reflection, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of the opportunity to start listening and developing. I had good listening skills before, but I wasn't really listening. And the counseling gave me the chance to really sit back and let somebody speak for 50 minutes and actually really absorb as much of what they're saying. So I built those counseling skills through the course that I did, a 3-year advanced diploma. Now that was, you know, it was great because it brought me on this journey in the change of my career direction after many, many years in the social sector, doing the social cohesion work. But I suddenly realized, and I'm coming back to you, the college, your work and the college here, and the work around hypnotherapy is when I left being a counselor, qualified counselor, I didn't really leave with practical skills that gave people an opportunity to put into practice things they could implement on a daily basis for their own well-being. It gave me a range of other skills, analytical skills, listening skills. But actually, when it came to practical skills, I was actually barren of a lot of basic tools that I could use. And so, you know, I could do the introspection, I could do the psychoanalytical parts of my work in my head, I could actually empathize, I could connect. But I was finding out clients were saying, okay, it will go so far as 3 or 4 sessions, then what? And I think the then what is a really powerful question. And that's actually, it's got answered by my work with the college and actually doing an additional Hypno-CBT course, which has provided me with a whole array of tools that I implement every day in my cases. And I implement them as and when, but they give me enormous psychological flexibility personally, but they also give psychological flexibility to the clients, because any individual I am working with, particularly in anxiety conditions / the OCD, which is a much more complex condition, wants to, in effect, is looking for practical relief. And I can only go so far as saying, well, it may have come, let's reflect on your past. It may have started here, but people want to know, fine, it may have started there. It gives me some handle on the situation. But today I'm having these impacts. What can I do to manage that? And I think it's the decision I took to do the counseling diploma, but to then do the Hypno-CBT gave me the best opportunity for my clients, and actually the Hypno-CBT played to the most important element of me, which is the practicality of my therapy. And I think the practicality of therapy is really what people are looking for. And yes, you need to have those range of skills. And the college also teaches the range of skills. The work with Mike and Baum, the range of value skills, the ability to listen, the ability to record, the ability to start to understand analytical skills were also rebuilt into the course. So they reinforced a lot of my previous learning. So I guess I'm saying today my journey has been the best thing I could have done after doing therapy was not to just go along and do integrative, psychodynamic, and a person-centered, talk about your past, but actually bolt on the Hypno-CBT, which gave me a really useful set of really incredible tools that every day make a difference for my clients. And I can't underscore that.
Well, let's talk about these different kind of approaches that you were trained in. I want to go back and also talk about some of your early work in a minute too. But so, I mean, you're saying, you know, you did counseling that exposed you to kind of psychodynamic insights, you know, and I love that you said it might have come from here rather than it came from here, because it's always speculative, that stuff, with no direct causality we can point to. And as we recount things, we know memory is not accurate either. But so that insight, you know, sort of early developmental insight of this, where it might have come from, and then the counseling aspect, which is this whole kind of core conditions. Let's create this space. What I'm hearing you say is, you know, reflective listening, that the client will solve their problems spontaneously if given, you know, as Carl Rogers says, you know, these core conditions are necessary and sufficient. Was his kind of really quite ballsy claim that this is sufficient. We don't need to do anything else. We're just going to provide this. But you're saying basically your experience is insight, great, but didn't create change. Supportive core conditions, necessary, but not really sufficient. Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, there may be, through the Hypno-CBT course, the history of hypnosis was, again, eye-opening in many ways. Look, there is a journey that we've all, as therapists, we've all learned about. Some of us are going on. But the reality is, listening and having core counseling skills may have been really useful up to, I would say, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. But the public wants something different. The public wants something which empowers them, not being sat in a chair and going, okay, speak for an hour. Let's talk about the past. Let's talk about how bad your life has been. Let's talk about the difficulty you have. No, they want to go away and take charge and ownership of their life. And I think something's changed in the last 10, 20 years, where the sense of ownership in clients is really strong. You know, they don't want to be coming. Who was it that said, there was a therapist that's one of the trauma therapists, you know, my job is to make myself as redundant as possible, as early on as possible with a client, because I want them to go away and be their own therapist. I want them to take charge of their life, because in my opinion, more than half the problems is they've had a core weakening of who they are, their sense of self, their sense of ability to do things. But in the end, if they're able to do things, they're able to feel that they can cope with things, they can get through them. That's their personal journey. I can't go on that journey with them. So the key here is, I think, the last 2 decades, and with the huge dynamism that's taking place in the mental health field, clients are not going to sit longer than a few sessions and go, okay, this is my past problem. They're going to log off and go. And I think we're in a different environment right now, where we need to be meeting their needs to empower themselves pretty quickly. I don't mean pretty quickly like a couple of sessions go away, but they feel that they have a stake in the healing process.
Well, and we know that aspect about, you know, the locus of control, you know, being there. So, well, let me ask you also, you know, all this focus on a trauma-informed approach and these sort of things, and the kind of the key question there is, you know, not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. Now, I hear you saying yes, but that's not enough either.
That is not enough. That is still not enough. That is absolutely right. Okay, what happened to you is one component of the understanding journey. And, you know, if we are looking at somebody managing their symptomology, their experiences over their life, with OCD, it's about management. Okay, we know that the condition is not going to go away for good. But if somebody wants to, for example, manage their life so their life is as best as it can be, then the reality is understanding where the issues may have come from is just one element of the management process. The other element is the biological management, i.e., how to calm themselves down, the work we did in Hypno-CBT, how to breathe, how to visualize, how to do the ego strengthening. It's the practical, biological, cognitive, emotional interaction between the three. And that's what the Hypno-CBT really drove home with me, this combination approach, which actually, for me, is the only way.
Well, I love that, you know, you name this kind of this integrative, all these dimensions and aspects, you know, not just the cognitive, emotional, behavioral, or physiological. Let's come back though to find out why didn't you go and do CBT? Why didn't you do ACT? What attracted you to hypnosis clearly being front and central in what we're doing. And then it's got the CBT in it as well. But tell me, why the hypnosis?
The hypnosis, because first of all, starting off with, I wanted something where I could get a client to use their own sense of visualization and their own sense of creativity in their mind, right? To be able to be as creative, as open, and to allow the power of their mind to also be part of the asset in their healing journey. But to do it in a way where relaxation was fundamental to that process. We could take them down into a place where they're fully still in control, but actually where their mind's much more open, their mind is much more creative, they're able to engage, and in a way, use the power and the focus of their mind to be able to be another element in their healing journey. And hypnosis for me fitted into that. Why the relaxation? Because I was always interested in anxiety conditions as well. That fits together. So it was like I knew that relaxation was a fundamental element because of the neuroscience work, the parasympathetic nervous system. We're going to have to go down the relaxation side. What would that include? Well, hypnosis is a really good tool. And that drove me in that direction, if that makes
sense. Not, but I want to come back and say, I don't think that's obvious for a lot of people. I think a lot of people might see hypnosis as being very directive and going into a trance and being a bit sort of directed and controlled, or going back into the past to find the source of things. Your ideas here, and I'm interested how you explained how you came to that idea of sort of affect regulation, the emotional regulation being important, but this other idea of creativity. And I'm going to use the word imagination, and this kind of creative imagination space where they can start to now come up with solutions in a way, and new pathways to where they might want to go. But how did you arrive at that? You've done counseling with some psychodynamic aspect in there. I can see where your interest in the affect regulation comes from, the importance of that. But this creative playfulness, which I'm sensing is you seeing as so important, so people can get out of the rigid train tracks of the fact they can't solve their problems. Yeah. So how did you come to that?
I tell you why, and that's a really good question. I mean, I had hypnotherapy many years ago, and having had 3 or 4 sessions of hypnotherapy at that point, which I found helpful, what that did for me is it triggered the creativity within.
Interesting.
The imagination within. And I found that enormously healing. One, I knew that it was my brain doing the imagination, giving me a way to relax, but also feel more in control. So it's interesting. I made the connection between my imaginative brain being a form of a solution for my own health. And I grabbed onto that. And it was a personal journey. Many of us as human beings, when somebody is talking to us or suggesting things, our brains are going off to some degree. They're going off. They're in a trance, like a little bit of a trance. Like I hate using the term trance, I know, but let me use that just for a description. We're in that kind of groggy phase, and our minds are moving. They're not static. They're very dynamic. And I think that in itself is part of the healing energy and healing journey. And it's the individual's own mind finding a pathway for the individual to feel at least much more in a place where they're, if not more in control, contented, relaxed, less symptom-ridden, etc.
Well, I think it's just wonderful that you managed to have that, clearly that exposure to hypnotherapy in that way as well, because not everyone has that, and that sense of experiencing the power of your own creativity, because I think that's something I'm passionate about, is seeing that in my particular philosophical system, the kind of the core quality of our essence nature is actually creativity and freedom. And bliss, but we'll take that too. So that's it. If we are God, then God is creativity, freedom, and bliss, which is very interesting. I think from the point of view I'm relating to people, I sense that we're wanting to tap into that at your core. You're a creative being.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's fundamental. That's a fundamental element. I think, we're both stressing this, but it's so important. Look, creativity is part of the solution here. Mark, you taught me this. You taught me this initially early on. Emotional and mental rigidity is what we're trying to be flexible, get it more flexible.
Yes, yes.
I remember this from you. I use it regularly. Look, I ripped it off from you. Sorry, but that mental flexibility is what we're looking for with clients, and that's their own creativity as well as a range of other practical tools and reflective tools.
Let me come back and ask you a question then this way around. Your work, the social cohesion work you did, the position you found yourself in, which I think was very challenging, I imagine, from the left and the right, and different different people, even from the center, maybe. If you had had these tools of emotional self-regulation, if you had been able to use your creativity or recognize, solve, strategize, or whatever, do you think that would have been different?
Yes, it would have been markedly different. And it would have been markedly different because I wouldn't have started to self-blame myself. I wouldn't have started to get into distorted ways of thinking, unhelpful ways of thinking, which we know the longer somebody's going on unhelpful ways of thinking, the more easier that pathway becomes. We know that from early on. So I had unhelpful thinking styles. I went further with the stress of the situation, with the attacks coming in from people on social media and other ways, in this very difficult world of trying to hold a position where people just need to be respected for who they are. It wasn't even any kind of polarizing position, right? Just to hold that middle ground. The attacks meant that I started to chip away at me. I started to chip away at, was the issue with me? I started to go into unhelpful ways of thinking. I started in the high anxiety to start to go towards catastrophizing. And that's all high stress, high intensity behavior in the flight or fight response. My amygdala was on like octane fuel. And it was like that for 10 years. So guess what happens? What we all know. If you're in that state, doctor was saying high blood pressure, raised cholesterol. Here we go. Now the biological problems are kicking in. And, you, again, in the course and what you said very clearly, our mind and our body are totally interconnected. Something's happening in the mind, you're going to have impacts on the body. The view that doctors have said, well, this is wrong with your body, but not even realizing 10, 20 years ago to ask how they're doing in terms of their own psychology and their peace of mind. The two are so interconnected. So there were also physiological responses, and that was the high stress response on octane high fuel for many years.
I can't imagine, how challenging that must be to have that sort of going on and be able to sleep at night with whatever's going on social media against you on this and such heat around it all. But let me ask you a more personal question about your faith, because I don't know, maybe you now switched and you're just humanist, but are you religious, spiritual? What role has that played for you? Has it played a protective, inspiring factor in the work that you do? And I'm interested in this enthusiasm, you see, but also a protective factor, or have some of the ideas not been so helpful? And I'm interested in your evolution, maybe with that, your faith through this process and then through into therapy as well.
Wow, Mike, this is a brilliant question. I could be here for hours. Let me cut this down really quickly. Let me cut this. It's a brilliant question. So I was born into a liberal Muslim family, who when we were kicked out of Uganda, my father was never religious. He went to work in Saudi Arabia. My mother became very religious as a form of taking control of what was a very difficult set of circumstances. And so, she was very religious. And over time, I kind of picked up, and my identity became much more Muslim than anything else over time.
And let me just ask, is that religious faith in God or religious let's follow the rules?
let's follow the rules. Let's
Okay.
let's call myself much more follow the rules, less faith in God. It was more of the rote kind of Catholic stuff, right? That you kind of just follow it, you follow it. And
We follow it, this will save us.
this will save us. It's the only path. My God, sorry, due respect, what a load of rubbish. I'm going to come to that. So in a way, that journey created a mental inflexibility for me and for many people on this earth. Okay, religion has its benefits for many, many, many millions, tens of millions of people. Great. But for me and for other people in life, it created the scenario where mental inflexibility became quite rigid. And therein lies also a problem of extremism, right? You can take that to, I'm not saying religion causes extreme, I'm saying the mental inflexibility is what we're talking about here. And in that journey, when I was working with people of my faith around challenging extremism, I came across some of the most twisted, bizarre set of belief patterns thrown at me. And I suddenly, as a liberal, easygoing guy, started to get ostracized by sections of my co-religionists, because I would say, why is it that women can't work, right? Give me a reason. And they would say, well, on this day in 758, this paragraph. And I said, well, I don't give a shit about 758. Tell me today, why can't women work? And so I was a realist by nature. And suddenly I realized that actually the mental inflexibility was not making sense to me. And in that journey, and also partly in that ostracization journey, and partly in the fire that I took on from people who wanted to defend indefensible positions, I started to question everything. Questioning everything, it led me on my journey, I think, to be a good hypno-CBT, at least somebody who practices what they preach in hypno-CBT. What are the facts? I believe it's going to be catastrophic tomorrow. What are the facts? Let's talk about them. Show me the evidence. So actually, my starting journey led me on to, I'm not going to believe anything until you can demonstrate the facts to me. And kind of set me up in my own therapy work when people say, oh, I think something magical is going to happen in OCD if I don't count to 3. Interesting.
Magical thinking in OCD. Yeah. So you like the skepticism which infuses our training.
I love this. I fully embrace skepticism. I have fully embraced the skepticism. And with that skepticism has come to my position today that, do I believe in religion's doctrines? No. I believe any kind of doctrinal one way is the only way is part of the problem of the mental inflexibility many people are having to deal with. I believe if people get through their spirituality a sense of strength, good for them. But I firmly believe if that causes impacts on other people, that's the line. I also believe that many people are suffering from this kind of early rigidity of this is the only path. And I hope that my therapy work can also assist some of them. And I do, even in my therapy work. I have people of Muslim faith who come to me and say, I've been taught this. I did this wrong. For example, I had sex with somebody. I'm going to suffer the unending fire of hell. Let's talk about, where's the evidence? And so I'm great into this. Let's talk about it. And most people by the end of that journey are thinking, do you know what? I can put that to bed a bit. And I think this is important. Our work is about, truly, our work in therapy right now is give the clients the best opportunity to look at the evidence. What is the evidence? Demonstrate to me what. Right?
No, I love that. I've had many. Well, practicing in North London, I had a lot from the Orthodox Jews from Golders Green and things like this, and rabbis, and the other question I would ask to say, well, these are the different rules and things like that. I get that, but I want to talk to you about your own relationship with God. I want to find out what does that mean to you? Do you have any direct sense of that? God loves you? Do you have any sense of that? As opposed to being mediated through the rabbi or whoever, you know, you get direct sense of that. So this would kick off some really interesting sort of discussions that could get into, you know, because this is kind of where the values come from. I think, you know, this is, you know, you can be in touch with this. And if you're not in touch with it, then what are you buying into?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you following?
I'll tell you what, Mark. Let me tell you what kind of where I am. I am in that humanist stroke spiritual place right now, and I'll tell you what. The sense of energy, the sense of healing that I've received from other human beings tells me that actually human energy itself is just as powerful as any godlike belief. And for me, that has really driven me in the right. I think human beings, we are our own liberators through connection. Again, what the course brought for me, in my interpretation, is we need to, lots of the anxiety conditions are because we lose connection with ourselves and others.
Mm.
Right? And I think connectivity is really a powerful tool and part of Hypno-CBT work, reconnecting with yourself, right? Reconnecting with yourself.
And yes, and intimacy of contact with others.
Correct.
Real human contact, you know, that openness, you know.
That openness, that honesty, that authenticity, that real authenticity. And I say to my clients, right, if we're talking about authenticity and honesty, you know, you don't like this. You've told me in therapy you don't like this. Did you manage to say it at that point? No, I didn't. How long's that been going? 15 years. Well, I don't tell them it, but I think, why are you in this state? Because you're not authentic to yourself.
Yeah, and that is, and this the you know, one of the functions of that space is for them to be authentic. I had an army wife come to see me. She's Chinese, but in the UK, and we just did a single tour back. Well, I ran over as I used to in my early sessions. It was 2.5 hours in the end, and because basically we got there quite quickly. She was pretty intensely homophobic and just had difficulty with that, and I actually here I kind of went to core conditions and just really just created that space. And you know, I mean a few things, but really just listen to let her tell a story, ask some questions. But she just said at the end, she just shook my hand so hard. She said, "Thank you." She goes, "I feel I've experienced what divine love is."
Wonderful.
So I thought, you know, just that it's not just the core conditions, it's also having a positive energy and belief in the person and seeing their potential and kind of just listening and looking to that and drawing that out. Just by the way, I used to feel with my spiritual teacher by the power of her own perception. She didn't see me as this worthless thing. She saw me as this. And she'd get very upset if I would talked about myself like this. She'd be like, oh. So, you know, because she didn't see me like that. So I think anyway, I just, because, you know, you're so enthusiastic and this positive energy that's just, you know, people are picking it up here, your enthusiasm. Where does that word come from? Entheos. And it does mean to be filled with theos, to be filled with God energy, spirit. What is that energy? You know, you say, you know, you're picking it up from your being authentic and the connectedness with others. But I just want to acknowledge that energy, you know.
Thank you. I mean, look, it's, again, this is part of my journey. Again, through the college, part of the journey, the people I connected with, my journey here is taught me that my life is about my life force. I'm going to be completely authentic and open and honest. My life force is sustained by other people. That is it. I am sustained by others. And so the more authentic I am, the better I am. And this is where I've reached. It's not about God. It's not about temples. It's not about mosques. It's not about churches. It's me connecting with a person I'm sitting next to and leaving there thinking, God, you know, I'm glad I'm here today. That is the beauty of it.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, you know, and I know you're doing this, you're doing your one-on-one therapy work now, and I know you're also doing some group work, and I have a sense you might go back to some of those broader projects. Who knows, you know, because there's a sense of wanting to solve these big problems and have an impact, I think. I don't know. And I don't want to psychopathologize that.
I learned that today from you. Definitely not going to do.
Well, I'll just before we move on, I just want to see, I was watching a BBC Storyville. I'm sure, do you know that documentary series on BBC Storyville?
Lovely.
A one on North Korea and the pastor in South Korea who helps to, I don't know if you watched that episode.
He throws bottles in the river, isn't that right? He was throwing resources in the.
No, no, no. He arranges for them to escape from North Korea and go all the way through China, all the way into Vietnam, Laos, and down into I mean, just it's phenomenal. And he goes and for some of the journey he's there himself. And just I don't know, it's just about 1,000 people he's helped through this. And it just the whole thing blew me away. I mean, the level of suffering and restriction these people have, and that the gulag is still going there. And this man, and he was Christian pastor. I mean, that was a big part of it. And I had so much respect for his what he was doing and what he was making happen and how much he was involved in it and the impact he had. It was extraordinary. So, faith, I don't know, there's something. It made me kind of rethink about the importance of faith and the principles that some of these religions have brought forth, the values, and that people enact them in incredible ways. Incredible ways. Anyway, if anyone's, I just recommend you watch that one, everybody out there. It's phenomenal. Like 3 days later, and we're all still talking about it in our family. It touched us so deeply. So let's come on. So you had a blast on the training course?
I had a blast on the training. I mean, the training course, first of all, obviously the range of tools, but the training styles and the training techniques were, again, just incredibly eye-opening. I found the trainers so receptive. Your trainers and your staff were always open, always sending. I tell you what, I've never had this. When I ask them a question, I don't expect an email, but I get an email with some pamphlets and stuff to read. And I was like, this is brilliant. So there was a lot of good information constantly coming forward, and I could always ask. And I think that's the core to my learning. I picked up an incredible amount pretty quick. I finished the course 7 months ago now, really kind of finished it 7 months ago. And in 7 months, my learning journey has been exponential. Exponential.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. I mean, we cover a lot very quickly. There's a lot to unpack and then a lot to kind of continue joining things. Well, I mean, that's great to hear the other trainers too. I mean, obviously, I know they're a good bunch and a great bunch. And I think they have. I think one of the core qualities for anybody that's thinking of taking the training, and you can speak to this, what might be one of the core qualities that they have. Well, it's two things. One, they genuinely care about people's journey, and secondly, they love learning. So have a love of learning. And I was talking with somebody else today. I think these are perhaps the two most important qualities. The love of learning, in some ways, more important, particularly kind of with our course, because even if you don't go on and become a therapist, you'll just have such a feast of learning. So you want to speak to you. I sense that you have that. Obviously, you're an uplifter to the core of your being in terms of helping other people.
I'll tell you what. I mean, it was a case of trying to, in a way, keep them down from the volume of good stuff that was coming up, because there was so much good stuff that was coming up in the sessions that actually it was really trying to keep up with it. And then what was the beauty of this is that it was then repeated in different ways, so you could put it into practice. This wasn't about just anyone looking to do just a theory course. Forget it. If you're looking to make this part of your life, if you're looking to put this into practice with your clients, if you're looking to really implement this, this is the course, right? I sat 3 years learning about a lot of theory and putting into practice, but I never put this amount of volume into practice as I did with the Hypno-CBT course. And that actually plays to my strength. My therapy is very practical. I've been to therapists where I give you a therapist who sat there for an hour and I paid her an extortionate amount of money and she didn't say a word. And I think to myself, what an utter waste of my time. Why did I? And that's, for me, that's not what people are looking for. They're looking at the interactive, the empathic, the authentic, the open, the connective. That's therapy for me. You're going to sit quietly. You didn't need training. I'm not going to pay you any money. Frankly, go away and train in the Hypno-CBT course and come back and then do it.
And so, what's the highlight? What's the standout moment? Favorite day? Favorite exercise?
Well, the standout moment for me was the pendulum. Actually, the standout moment for me was
On the first day. Huh?
the first day. The pendulum exercise was like, oh my God, look at that, started moving, doing nothing. The pendulum's moving. And actually, the four words that came across that stuck with me from that was power of the mind. Power of the mind. That's what I took away from that. And that stuck with me. And for me, that's what I kind of always go back to. Think about the power of the mind for the client. Think about what the client can do. It's always there in my head.
So nice. Wow. Right on the first day. So you must have felt, I made a good choice.
I'll tell you what, we went through summer. I mean, we trained through the summer. I lost my summer, and I'll tell you what, it was well worth losing. And I love my son. It was well worth losing the summer, and it was a great set of people on the course.
Fantastic. Well, so, and how did you you barreled through and got, made, you already could in some way start to apply it because you already were doing your counseling, you're doing your therapy, so you don't really need to go and complete the qualification in some ways. In some ways you can just start to bring some of it in, but I think you did go ahead and push through and complete the qualification.
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
I did. Completed the qualification level 5. For me, level 5 was, I wanted something that gave me the ability to work with slightly more complex, difficult conditions and anxiety. I wanted to also have the confidence and, again, the tools to do that. I like to go deeper around the anxiety issues that I work with. And so the level 5 for me was a starting step. You know, I'm going to be doing other things back in the college. Again, everyone listening to this, I'm not going to stop learning. There's some fantastic courses that have come out, I've subscribed to, but my journey is starting in this career. My journey will continue with the college just because I know the quality of the material and the teaching has really been fantastic for me. So it's the start of a journey, but what it's done is to give me solid foundation in therapy, not a weak And, you know, look, I'm going to be completely frank. We have tens of thousands of therapists just in the UK. Forget the US, we're in a different league there. But actually, my motto, which I took away from people like Sue and others on the course, was be the best therapist you can be. And that means making your foundations as solid as possible and actually giving people the best service they can. Because not only will you help them, but actually you maintain your business going forward. You won't have drop-off of clients. You'll have, if they want, they will return. If they need you again, they'll come back. And I think that's it's the quality of therapists. And there are some out there who are not just cutting the mustard. Frankly, we don't need some of that. We need high quality therapy out there in the public domain right now, because we know that there are existing problems, social media, etc.
so how's it going for you in terms of you have your website up there? We could take a look if we want, but it's counseling for anxiety, I think, is that it?
Yeah, counseling for would be number 4, anxiety. Yeah, and that's out there. I'm getting clients that come in through my website. I've done some SEO work now, so done some SEO work on it. I'm writing my blogs. People, if you're going to put up your website, blogs are a great way of learning and getting content and, you know, getting noticed and just learning more. So the website's bringing in clients. I'm now at the process. I on average, I work with between 8 to 12 clients a week. Not bad. I'm slowly increasing, but what I'm doing is I'm not rushing, because again, this is about learning. It's getting my talent. It's about managing the clients well. And one thing I do, which many therapists, I was taught not to, and I think it's totally wrong. I think it's bizarre. But what I do is after the session, with the agreement of the client, if they're happy with it, I kind of put it in a summary in an email to them, and I send it to them so they've got something that they can take away as well. So I really spend time on
nice.
Summarize it, put down what they said, put down the gains they've made. Again, Mark, something you know, so much came from the course. When the client is doing well, reinforce it. That was driven through in the course. Reinforce it. So I'm a great cheerleader when a client says, do you know what, I've got, you know, if they've got agoraphobia and haven't been out for a week and they go out to the park, I'm like, fantastic. You did that. That's reinforcing. You did it. Fantastic. You know, it's like, come on, you did it. Just being behind them, getting behind them, right? And I think that is, if nothing else, that is one of the core conditions of a good therapist, realizing the gain and just pushing forward with the game, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, because you see them light up as soon as, and you know, you direct the conversation. So, what did you manage? You did that. Fantastic. How did you manage to do that? I want to know. How did you get, how do you, you know, but so we, you know, they can replicate it, they can do it again. And that they take, you know, one of the principles from Mike and Bam is that, you know, the client takes credit for it.
Absolutely. And honestly, I got that from the course. 3 years in a counseling qualification was like, sorry.
Yeah. Well, you know, we got, you know, look, let's be clear to everybody here. This isn't stuff, there is some stuff that we have ourselves created, and the way it's put together and what we've chosen to put together is unique. But, you know, we're standing on the shoulders of giants like Don Meichenbaum and his, what are the core skills of an expert psychotherapist, which just distill things at such a high level that, you know, you start to think about these basic fundamentals. You can't go wrong if you're tracking on that stuff. You know,
That's right.
let me ask you now. Because I was printing out actually module 5 from the Don Meichenbaum course, which is the art of questioning and guided discovery procedures. I don't know if you've taken Don's course there, but
I haven't, but I've been told by Sue I definitely got to. So I'm definitely getting onto it in January.
So my question for you is, and you may not have this to hand, but maybe it'll come through a little bit later. What's your favorite question to ask in therapy?
Oh my God. Do you know the one that kind of, well, the favorite question to ask is, I always do that. I'm curious when you first noticed that. That's the one that I kind of regularly, I'm curious when you first noticed that. That's one of the questions, but I'm always using that. I'm really curious when that happened. Curious when you noticed that. It's interesting that happened. Tell me more about that kind of inquisitive. Do you know there are 2 things that again stick in my mind. Curious, inquisitive, 3 words, and playfulness. Curious, inquisitive, and playfulness. And that's how I try to balance my therapy. And again, through I think Mike and Barn and others, don't lose your playfulness in therapy as well. You know, we are all in our ways wanting that sense of playfulness, which opens up a client as well.
Well, it's there when where they're going to be most creative, isn't it? And where they're going to learn best. Yeah, it's a lot of serious therapists out there. I went to do teach in Italy at an Instituto Watson. It's a Watson Institute, very behavioral psychotherapy. And the guy there said, goodness me, a happy therapist. He says, we don't see many of those.
That's brilliant.
You know, so, you know, you have the playfulness. Yeah, it's like the seriousness is just, that's the problem, is the client is too serious, you know, often, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. So let's find out more about your actual work now, what you focus in on working with anxiety here, and then you have also a case study to share, and I'm eager to look at that and see how you work with this. So tell me a little bit more about the types of anxiety that you work with, a little bit about the approach there, but let's then look at the case study perhaps.
Yeah. So I work with anxiety conditions that go from agoraphobia through to panic disorder, through to health anxiety, social anxiety, and OCD. So I pick up a wide spectrum of anxiety conditions in my work.
And let me ask you, is that entirely based from the training you did with us, and obviously we point you towards the right books to read on that, but also have you done some additional workshops or training, because you are talking there about getting into some of the more moderate severe, maybe not severe, but you know, moderate severe presentations, you know, with your where panic disorders really set in strong, etc.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a combination. It's a combination of the tools and techniques within the course and curiosity to then go and learn more and read up on it, and specifically read up on the segments of the anxiety conditions, but also previous work that I'd done, obviously in the counseling course, but also again through my therapy and other work done. So it's a combination of these elements. And yeah.
Recommended books on these for people?
Recommended books there are a number of books around. For example, I'm reading books on health anxiety. I tell you what I could do is I could email you if we can get them round.
Yeah, if you could, I think that'd be nice for people. I'm always keen for people to. I mean, I'm a big fan, of course. That's a bit of the kind of the Bible a bit in some ways. Because you're in a really solid ground with that, and just such thorough research with it. But if you've got a little list we could ping out to people afterwards, I think that'd be lovely.
Definitely. I've got some really good ones, including things like ACT, issues around anxiety and panic disorder. So I'll send the list over and do get them round. Yeah, some really good books that I think have added to my learning. So it's a combination over a number of years of different strands that have brought me to this situation.
But it sounds like quite a lot of that has been like your own further reading into this to really get a grip on what's going on.
Much more further reading. I have a really bad habit is when I go out and have a coffee, I take a book with me, and everyone keeps thinking I'm the nerd of the century because they see me with psychology books all the time, right? But actually, I love it. It's like if I read 4 or 5 or 10 pages over a coffee, great. I'm still learning. I'm absorbing. I'm still picking up stuff. So for me, it's the only way I function.
Now, let me ask you a question. I mean, in one way, anxiety. It's anxiety, and that's a big label. It covers a lot of things. We also know when we get into cognitive therapy of anxiety disorders, Beck, very specific and different approaches for the different types of anxiety. So speak to that, the difference between people who just kind of treat anxiety as kind of one big bowl of sort of homogenous porridge, and those who have a more specific understanding of the processes going on with a particular type of anxiety and how that informs the choices, the conceptualization and choices in therapy. Should we talk about that a little bit before we get into your case?
Yeah, absolutely fine. And have we got time for the case study as well? Is that still
yes? Yes. How long? I mean, if we spend like 5 or 8 minutes on this, and then we'll port it, because I think people just, one of the things it just struck me so strongly was, wow, CBT like really understands this is social anxiety is different than this, is different than this. And there are different processes going on, and your treatment plans then are different, or your interventions are different.
Absolutely. So let me just give you 2 examples. Like, for example, agoraphobia, which is a fear of open spaces or a fear of traveling on public transport, a fear of being stuck in lifts. That, for example, would classify, and if it's ongoing and if it's causing sustained issues and problems for the person, that will be classified as agoraphobia. Now, in those situations, there are a number of ways to possibly work with somebody in that. So certainly looking at the root and the emanation of the initial thoughts and feelings that the person has is the starting point. But understanding in that process that actually there are some, for example, the work that I do with them would look at what are the core beliefs? We'd start off with some of the elements of, right, let's look at your styles of thinking. Let's look at core beliefs. So core beliefs, why do you feel you can't cope with sitting in the underground, right? And drilling down through that and trying to work out what is the core belief. And usually people will say, I'm just summarizing, there are differences, but they'll say, I feel I'm weak. I feel I'm not able to cope. I feel like something bad, catastrophic is going to happen to me. And when you come down to that, the core beliefs, for example, I am weak. I then work with them to look at, okay, when you think of I am weak, what other thoughts come in? And then I look at things like assumptions they make from that core belief. I look at rules. If they believe they're weak, I must step outside the underground. I must stand for a while breathing outside the underground before. What are the rules they make? So I'm starting to look at the cognitive processes. That's part of the work. I then look at what they've achieved, right? What have they achieved in their life? So they might be trying to get on the underground themselves. Great, fantastic. That's a really good thing, reinforcing the positive. And then I'll be thinking, okay, what can you do? And I'll try to develop with them a way of actually slowly exposing them with psychoeducational work, with a lot of support in psychoeducational work, supporting them in a graded fashion, in a very slow graded fashion, of getting them to, for example, sit in a room if they've got, which is a bit smaller. And if they feel happy with that, sit in a smaller room. They feel happy with that. How about you sit in a car with somebody driving? Do you feel comfortable? I'm moving them through exposure.
Graded, yeah.
Graded exposure to be able to then, maybe a few months down the line, hopefully less than 6 months, have the self-belief, have this strengthened sense of ego and sense of self to be able to know that they have coping techniques, whether that's breathing, relaxation, psychoeducational understanding, exposure, relief and exposure work built into the process. Those are the kind of set of processes that go with agoraphobia. Now, health anxieties would need a different treatment plan. They work on the same premise of essentially exposing somebody to their fears. Underneath all of these phobias and fears and these conditions are a set of fears, but they do need different plans to deal with them. So a person with health anxiety, for example, I'm working with somebody who's got a health anxiety, they might have a heart attack. Nothing wrong with their heart. They've been to 60 different health specialists and still don't believe them. All right. And because the young man is spending so much of the day holding his pulse, holding his heart, he's not working. He's more worried. He's sitting in his bedroom, really checking himself and his heart. And my work with him is to say, okay, start off. It's an interesting one. The first session I had is, how's that working out for you?
Well, that's one. Well, I think that's a favorite question of a lot of people in this approach. Yeah.
How's that working out? Oh, I spent 7 hours of the day worrying. The outside. All right, so that was really stressful. Yes, it was. So did you go out? No. How's your life, Joe? No. And he's telling me his life is awful. And I'm saying, okay, so this is really not, I'm reinforcing this is not helping you. So let's move this on a bit. So the starting point was to say, okay, let's move you on. And if we're moving you on to that, do you know those things you do, checking your pulse, right? Do you think that when you check your pulse, do you think less about your heart or more? Oh, I think more about my heart. Great. That's fascinating, isn't it? It's interesting. Oh, yeah, I didn't think of that. So what I'm trying to do is change behavior there. I'm starting off with a change of behavior rather than a change of the cognitive side, rather than the cognitive approach I took with the other case, right? I start with the change of behavior. So, okay, so when you don't check your pulse, you feel better. Oh, and then I'll say to them, tell me, if you're not checking externally, are you checking internally? And they'll go, what do you mean? And I'll say, are you hearing for your pulse? Are you internally hearing that you can hear your heart? Or are you introspectively, inside yourself, sensing that your heart's beating? And they'll go, some of them will go, yeah, I do that. And I'll say, okay, does that help in making you think away from your heart, or is it focusing on you onto your heart, or focuses me on your heart? Is that helpful? No. Oh, okay. So how do I stop that?
No, I love this. Because you're doing, the client's having the insight, but you've got a framework, you've got a strategy, you understand how dysfunctional these are, but you're having them come to see it for themselves so they can drop it. Yeah, lovely, lovely. Good stuff. Good stuff. So, and the previous one, but it seemed to be, and I get a sense that a strengths-based approach, I'm not sure, but am I right that focusing in on strengths is something that you also mentioned ego strengthening. A lot of people do on a training, they start off, they love the hypnosis, the ego strengthening. Then before we know it, they've wandered off and they're into full-blown CBT and they've forgotten about hypnosis. And I'm back again, like reading Braid and then Coué, and I'm back going, this ego strengthening stuff, it's really good. It's really good in terms of bolstering, and self-belief.
Essential, Mark. That's why I'll never leave the hypnosis element. I will never leave it, because I can guarantee you, with every client who has agoraphobia, I can guarantee you it. There is something, either their carer, their parent, their friends, or the people at school, or somewhere along the line, chipped away at their sense of self. just chipped away at their sense of self.
By that you mean their sense of strength, sense of confidence, sense of
sense of confidence, sense of strength, confidence, who I am, my sense of ability to cope. That's been chipped out. This combination of things has been chipped out, whether it's through bullying, whether it's through mother who's just going, I should never have had you, chipped away at their sense. And when they have that sense, when I use the term ego, let's say their sense of self, if their sense of self is underdeveloped and fragmented, and they then go into a scenario where they feel overwhelmed, that is the classic agoraphobia case. That is, and you can do, I can spend years doing CBT, but underneath it, I need to strengthen the sense of self, right? Then you get maximal impact. So
and we don't need to do, and you're saying we don't need to engage in some sort of a disguised reparenting function of sort of transference, co-transference.
Transference. I mean, years of my counsel, well, am I your parent? Am I your mother? Give it a miss, right? Like, give it a miss.
Have you ever watched Gil Boyne? Anyway, I did some training with Gil. He had a big impact on the profession. One of the things he always did when he brought people out of hypnosis, he'd say, "Who do I remind you of?" He's checking for transference. He'd do that every time. He'd bring them out. He'd say, "Who do I remind you of anybody?" And they go, "Oh, you're my uncle," or my. So he's checking for transference. But I'm like, yeah, come on, let's move on. But so yeah, that's interesting. I think this strengths-based approach and this idea that we can actually just directly address it. Hartland's idea as a psychiatrist that basically, look, my psychiatric patients, if they felt stronger, they could cope with their symptoms. And that seems to me that's you're totally on board with that, yeah.
Totally. And again, I mean, this lady who I work with agoraphobia, years, her mother just kept saying, you're nothing, you're useless, you're nothing, you're useless. And guess what? She sits in a room because she thinks the world is against her. Where did that come from? Well, her sense of self is so eroded. So it's a good starting point is to say, listen, if nothing else, I'm not going to do anything else. I'm going to do some ego strengthening with you, and it's going to be relaxing. Let's take you into that place. And it also connects you with the patient, connects you with the client, gives you a connecting point.
And I think, yeah, it's beautiful. I think there's something else in there in terms of, people might think, investing in themselves, they're going to be selfish and building up the ego. But I think actually the opposite, and of course the far end of that, which we should do another session on this, is the issue of cognitive dissonance, which is massive in terms of what goes on in the work you were involved in before, where people cannot accept that they've done bad stuff, and because I'm just not the sort of person that could have, and so they get more and more rigid in their beliefs. They kind of this self-justifying self-righteousness and they could have actually gone I think the book on cognitive dissonance said people who could have lived in glass houses throw the most stones. They go down the other side of the pyramid, and then they become more self-justifying, and this dissonance, the cognitive dissonance, they just cannot accept, like, I voted for that guy and he's absolutely rubbish, for example. So anyway, we could talk, but this bolstering of the sense of self through the ego strengthening, I think, allows people actually to accept then some, okay, I might have made a mistake there. Which allows for this flexibility and this adaptation and updating to come in.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely. And it's fundamental. Look, we all make mistakes, and we want somebody to say, it's okay. Have the space to be able to voice that. What do you learn from that? That's what we need instead of today's world. You're a bad man. You're a bad woman.
I'll fall apart if I admit a mistake.
I'll fall apart. It's the end of the world. And here we go, catastrophizing. Oh, guess what? I need a therapist. But it's that kind of, we need to give people the space, and our work gives them the space, right?
Yeah. It's good stuff we do. It's a noble, I like Mike and Bam says, it's a noble profession. So let us have a look at your particular case study. And are we okay if we go over a little bit to 8:15 or something like that? How long do you think we need here?
8:15 will be good, and I'm very happy to go over. If people want to stay with us, I would love that, and I hope it really helps you.
Okay, fine. And there's one question here, and some people, if you want to pop some questions as we go through the case study particularly, we'll do them at the end. but I want to because I'll probably jump in a bit. But
Yeah.
let's. You've got share if you want to. I don't know if you've got PowerPoints. You just want to talk it through.
Perfect. Here we go.
Perfect. Okay, here we go.
Okay, let me just take this down. Good. Okay, let me just start off by, let's go into, look, I'm going into, by the way, I'm going to say some caveats. First of all, obsessive compulsive disorder is a condition which has some caveats around it in hypnotherapy. All right. It is not, hypnosis and hypnotherapy is not a 100% transference of activities you can do across into OCD. I want to be clear about that. And again, if anyone wants to work with OCD, and I would love people to work with OCD, we don't have enough practitioners working in this area. A good supervisor who works in anxiety conditions and hypnosis I would suggest, is the best combination for you to work with, because actually this is a complex condition in anxiety. As Mark said, I work with medium to much more complex conditions. This is far more complex, but I've put it up there because I just want more people to be interested in this condition. And
I just want to pick up on that, because I have picked up one of our trainers recently saying she wouldn't work with, even though she's trained in CBT, she wouldn't use hypnosis with OCD. And I was like, I think or use Hypno-CBT with OCD. And I said, I'm going to come back to it, because I think that's just not quite understanding the place of hypnosis in the process. But I'm interested to see what you say on that, because generally, why would you say, just broadly, hypnosis might not be a good idea for OCD in terms of the way a lot of people use it, let's say?
The primary reason, there is a primary reason. The primary reason is the practitioner needs to understand in OCD, there are things called obsessions and compulsions. The compulsions and obsessions would have behaviors attached to them. Now, in hypnosis, if there is not enough of a good understanding of the compulsions and obsessions, there is a chance that some of the hypnotic scripts may reinforce behavior or reinforce obsessions. That is the crux of the issue. Really, beyond there is kind of skirting around the edges. The core is, if you have a skilled practitioner who understands the client's obsessions and compulsions, hypnosis can be used as part of the integrative set of tools. And so when I hear people in hypnosis saying, oh, I don't want to work with OCD, I say, no, you've got this wrong. You can use it as part of an integrative set of tools, but you need to be skilled enough to understand the compulsions and obsessions. So any hypnotic script you develop or which you pick up doesn't inadvertently reinforce them.
How does that connect with, for example, I often say, before you teach somebody like a relaxation technique, you need to do what I would call a functional assessment. You need to understand how they're going to use it, because some people, particularly in panic disorder OCD, it's actually going to make it worse because they're going to use it. It's just going to actually be another safety-seeking behavior.
So that's exactly, I mean, that's a great idea. Great assessment there. Absolutely. It's how you use it and understanding your client and how they're going to use it are the essentials. Because you're right, we can give people breathing techniques who've got anxiety. And actually, if they just go into it and use it as something they can lean on as a crutch, that's an issue. But some people who use breathing techniques also might rapidly exacerbate the anxiety. So you've got to work out what's good for the client, right? In other words, the client's character is part of your assessment. Right? If I'm edgy and I go, oh God, I've got a breathing problem, and I give you a breathing exercise, bloody hell, I'm going to exacerbate it. It's just, know your client, know your client, right? Know your client. Basically.
So sorry, I took you off track here, but let's come back on.
So look, I'm talking about this condition because even more complex conditions can be treated really effectively by the integration of hypnosis into them. And I'm going to show you how. Look, some basic facts. I'm going to flick through these and get onto the planning, the treatment planning phase that all of us as therapists have to do with clients. Now, OCD, people go, is a cleaning disease. Well, that's one element of OCD. There are multiple forms of OCD. There could be harm OCD. There could be There's harm OCD, there is cleaning, there are obsessions and ruminations related to it. And so there are different types. But the thing I'm saying is OCD is quite prevalent. It's not a rarity. 1 in 40 people globally, that makes hundreds of millions of people affected by it. Okay, so it is big enough. If you want to go into this, obviously, to help people, but also as a business, there is a market here. So there's a market here. Now, there are a number of things that, like anxiety, create a manifestation of OCD, trauma events. Things like dislocation, being kicked out, violence, can create these traumatizing events that can also add to OCD. But let's also be clear in mental health. In the work we do in mental health, it's not just about genetics, it's about environment, it's about biology, it's also increasingly about food and nutrition, it's increasingly about the gut. We are learning much more that shows a whole holistic approach to treating mental health. That's also why I like this course. This course, Hypno-CBT course, was all about holistic attitudes, not my path is the only way. Okay, so holistic is the way we treat people. Now, the other thing is, just want to add on here, the shock of OCD is something people always mention. Usually around 16, 17, 18 is when the onset of the condition kicks in, and it really is a shock. And it's really a shock for people because it actually feels like they undergo a mini trauma. Okay, so as I talked about, traumatic events can lead to OCD coming out. The younger the trauma, the more likely it is that it will develop in adolescence. But here's the thing, and Mark and I stressed today, change is very real and possible in mental health conditions at any point in your life. The fact is, I remember as a neuroscientist, when I was being trained, the prevalent view in the 90s was, if you've got it and if you had a condition and you are over the age of 25, you've had it. That's what they used to say to me. You've had it. You got it for life. People in 92, just 30 years ago, what hope did they give people? None. Apart from, here's the medication, go away and take it. Seriously. We know today the neuroplasticity of the brain. And again, this is why this work is important. It's why the work of therapy is important. Any one of us can change our brain patterning at any time. Yes, it takes longer when we're older, but it can still change. And that neuroplasticity is really important because it is the seed of hope that we give to clients. Okay. So I also want to start off this whole process by saying, even with complex conditions, neuroplasticity, our brain and its ability to change and adapt, can happen at any age. It takes longer when we get older, but it still changes. Now, OCD is a spectrum of anxiety conditions. OCD and anxiety are linked. You won't find somebody with just OCD and separate to anxiety. They're linked. They're directly linked. And the reason OCD becomes sticky, or the thoughts are so sticky, is because of the anxiety associated with them. So I go back to this being an anxiety spectrum condition because
I agree. I think it's a mistake to take it out of the category of anxiety disorders. It's a really strong anxiety. So anxiety is absolutely central. The avoidance of anxiety is the central issue. The intolerance of anxiety is the central issue.
There we go. Mark's hit the nail on it's the central issue is the intolerance of anxiety. Full stop. Full stop. People will not do things because they're just scared of the anxiety response. And that's it. And so they maintain the positions, right? So in a way, I want to ask you just for your chat, put it in the chat right now. Do you think risk-taking aversion, i.e. not wanting to take risks, is high or low in people with OCD? Just put it in the chat. Be interesting to see
So that's a question for everyone watching, yeah?
For everyone watching, yeah. Do you think it's...
What do you mean by risk-taking aversion?
Do people with OCD, do they stay away from taking risk? Yes or no? Do they stay away from taking risks? Right? That's the question. We'll come back to the responses. So, key thing, give hope to clients. Change is absolutely possible. Now, this is interesting. Mark hit the nail on the head. It's an anxiety condition. But the thing I want people to remember from my little talk today is OCD in this condition is that it attacks the values of people who have the OCD. Now, for example, now listen to this. There is a condition called harm OCD where people can obsess and ruminate that they are going to do something harmful to another person. Now, take the statement I just said. I say to clients when they say, I've been worried, I'm going to harm somebody, I haven't left my home, I can't stand the anxiety. What they should be doing, as Mark has rightly pointed out, is actually going outside and carrying on with their life and putting themselves around other people because they are anxious about their fears. And what we're doing is exposing them to their fears. But the thing why, when I dig underneath, I find people who have these kind of fears have really strong, well-developed moral senses.
Mm.
So they actually care about people. They care about other people. So whenever somebody with OCD comes to me and says, you know, I have this condition, I can find you, the reality is inside of them. If we go back to the core of the individual, they are exactly the opposite of what the OCD is manifesting in them. So if they feel they're going to harm, they really care. If they feel they're going to touch their baby in an unfortunate way, by the way, it's not pedophilia. But for example, people who get obsessed, I don't want to change my baby's nappy because I might have this awful thought about my baby. The reason they're having these awful thoughts with OCD is because they really care about their baby. If they didn't care about their baby, the OCD wouldn't pick that thought. And once you work with the client and reveal that, they go, I'm not a weirdo, or I'm not mad, bad, and sad. And that's huge. Because they've been sitting in their bedroom for years, some of them going, I can't go out, I have to lock myself in. Actually, no.
I see that. I see that. Yeah.
Right. So I just want to say that a lot of the stuff. So when we talked about, I'm going back to this, because when we talked about value systems, Mark and I, value systems are so important in our work, particularly in things like OCD and anxiety. Value systems, really important. Ego, sense of self, really important. Here are some nuggets coming out. These are things you can work upon that really make a difference for people. So let me move on from this one. Okay.
Well, you've skipped one. We missed 6. We had 6.
Did you have 6? Did I skip one? Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say that, again, just reinforce one's personal values has an impact on the content of the obsessions. And again, just give me an example. If somebody comes to me and says, you know what, I keep having blasphemous thoughts of Jesus on the cross. And by the way, it's not somebody who starred in the Life of Brian. For those, I'm just too old. I said Life of Brian. Nobody will understand that probably on this call. But people who have blasphemous thoughts going in their heads and have an OCD condition, you will find more than ever that they're very religious. Religion matters to them. Guess what? The OCD creates the blasphemy, right? So just remember that in this kind of condition, and anxiety conditions, particularly OCD, there's a flip of their value systems.
Mm. So, it's the conflict with it that's causing the,
it's the conflict with it.
And because they think their kind of their thoughts are actually representative of who they are under their values, and they can't put that together.
And Mark says it so well. So the work is really about detaching them, sense of self, from the OCD. The OCD is not them. That's what I always say. Is this you? No, it's not. Good. You've recognized it's not you. That's the OCD. These are your values. This is you. That's the beginning of the opening of the gate. Right?
So it's kind of like, to bring that term, it is a cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
Going on for them massively I think that's a poor word, cognitive dissonance, to understand. It's not just sort of dissonance between two thoughts, it's dissonance between these thoughts and this sense of who I am, right?
Absolutely. It is that form of cognitive dissonance, and it's quite significant. That's the thing, right? That's the thing. In the end, they're not like that, but it's they've fused. They've fused. You know, we learned thought action fusion. Pretty much that's it. The sense they think it, they must be it. No, no. You know, what we learned again in the course is you think it, it's a thought. It's not you necessarily you. Right? So they fuse very quickly with the thought. They think it's them. It's not them. And I guess I'll show this. This is the kind of I just put up here a reinforcing cycle, but it reminds me of the kind of clock face work we did, Mark.
Yeah, no, it's a really, vicious cycle. Yeah.
Vicious cycle. This is a form of what I'll show you a vicious cycle as I go through the slides. This is part of the vicious cycle that people with OCD get caught in, right? So they have an obsessional thought. This is a woman I work with, a Nigerian woman, very religious, and she has ROCD, another form of OCD called relationship OCD, where she doesn't fully trust that her partner wants to be with her.
Well, this is very common though. This version of this. I mean, I wouldn't call it OCD, but I can see that I've had plenty of clients with that one, and it's a sticky one.
It's a sticky one. It's a very sticky one because they're constantly questioning. He or she didn't do this. Oh, it must be they don't want me. And it's a sticky one that comes back. So here she is. She says, my friend says she's in constant bliss in a relationship. Why don't I feel this way? That's the obsession. Guess what? She gets distressed. Back to what Mark said. It's anxiety. Anxiety rises. Because the anxiety rises, it gets sticky because it means something to her. The stickiness is the meaning. The anxiety is going up. Now, she doesn't realize that's the cause of the stickiness, but through psychoeducational work, we then make clear that that stickiness is because of the high impulse reaction, the high anxiety reaction. Guess what? When she feels the anxiety, the belief is she's got to do something to reduce it. That's the way, the coping mechanism she uses. So she copes with it by going and asking all her friends on her phone for hours, but tell me he loves me. Tell me, did you see he did this for me? Does that mean he loves me? And her friends are all fed up with her because this poor woman is asking the same question in a different way repeatedly. And what she does is she gets comfort for about 20 minutes or an hour and a half. And by the way, the compulsive behavior just keeps the cycle going round. So she gets temporary relief, but she's actually never reinforced it by compulsively asking for reassurance. So she's in this constant cycle, right? And you know, part of our work is also about making sure that we provide psychoeducational work for clients that gives them an understanding. So, you know, if you're listening, you can kind of hear that for me, the pure therapy counseling route would never work if I'm working with OCD. It would never work. I have to be much more engaging with the client, inform, educate, step back, let them come to conclusions. It's a much more dynamic approach rather than, oh, your hour's over, just leave your invoice at the end when you leave, which some therapists do. It's quite pathetic.
And by psychoeducational, you might, I mean, both educate them in the session, ask questions, but also give them something to read, or how would you?
Both. I educate them in the session, and then I make sure, as I said, I do with every client, is I send them a summary of an email with the reading or the slide I use. So I'll take a snapshot, send them a slide. And yes, it takes time. Look, I'm not saying you do that. But all I'm saying is my clients keep saying, I need something that I can go away with and kind of if I forget, because the other thing is OCD has an impact. OCD doesn't impact memory, but it weakens some memory elements. So the memory is not affected, but because they keep repeatedly, for example, asking, does he love me? Does he love me? The memory of things a partner may have done, which could have reinforced they love this person, get weakened. I hope that makes sense.
I guess.
it weakens memory. And so part of my work in anxiety conditions is also to say, here's what you said, here's the educational work, here's the stuff you can read up, here's what you came up with. So they've got it there with them.
Interesting. I want to come back to that. But I want you to get on with your slides here, so we can get to your case. I've got some questions, but I'm going to let you move ahead.
Absolutely. I'm just going to move on. I'm going to move on a couple of slides. I'll flip through a couple because I think I've talked about some of them, but I just want to go to the ones that I think are the main ones before I got into the treatment plan. Obsessions, people with OCD who have obsessional thinking, we call it our ego dystonic. Here we go. Go back to ego. Go back to the sense of self. They are against the sense of self of a person. They go against, they weaken the sense of self of a person. Going back to what Mark and I said, you can't do this work without taking hypnosis out of the equation. The strengthening of the sense of self is essential in this work, right? And hypnosis allows one conduit, one avenue to get in there in the therapeutic window. So obsessions, we call them ego dystonic, right? Those that go with the sense of values, when you get into this work, are called ego syntonic. So they go against the value. But the thing that people do when they're highly anxious, which obviously the OCD is an anxiety condition, is they ruminate. And this rumination is a form of coping, is a form of them coping. And then the compulsions, the doing, the hand washing, for example, become a way of providing relief. All right? Now,
with me here for that. Does anyone have any questions here? Lovely comments there. Thank you all for your comments. Somebody did ask, this was quite earlier, anonymous attendee, and I'm not sure if they've left. They said a question right at the beginning here. What did help you to build emotional resilience? This was really early on in the session. Before we got into your case here, what did help you to build emotional resilience, or what was the main coping mechanisms you used that helped you with such stressful situation? And what was the triggering point into deciding to change or redirect your career? So this is about you switching from your work on I can't find the word, but basically your anti-hate work out there, that you were doing.
Well, I mean, the thing about that was, whilst I enjoyed the work, I realized that actually was this moving me towards my life goals, which was to feel better. Just a starting point, right? I want to feel better. That's what our clients do. I'm just replicating what our clients want to feel better. And I thought to myself, right, is this work actually helping me in that way? Is it adding to my dysregulation? Yes. Is it adding to my distress? Yes. And I think it was also, let me just finish off by saying, I think it was also releasing myself from the heavy burden of the overcoat my parents had put on me that I must always achieve, right? My core belief maybe, and I know, is that maybe I'm just not good enough. And then I had to achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve. And actually there were times where I thought, where even when I took an hour or two off, I would beat myself up. Oh, you wasted a day. I'd say, look at that. Talk about cognitive distortion. I've taken 2 hours out. My thought was I've wasted a day. Look how twisted that thought was. And so I guess it came to a point where I thought, well, I'm not meeting my life goals. I'm not feeling better. I'm having emotional dysregulation. And actually, I've never taken some time out. I wonder how that feels. And that was the change for me. And I realized one last thing, that the thing that keeps me sustained, my energy sustained, me as a person going, are other human beings. And this was making me have a view of other human beings in a very negative way. And it was also sapping the life out of me.
Because of all that feedback that was coming back to you that was so difficult. So let me ask you to come. Thank you for that, and I want to just thank you for your honesty and openness through all of this, and your enthusiasm and your insight, and also it thrills me. I can't say how much it thrills me to see people who've picked up so much stuff from the course and then using it in really creative ways, kind of standing on our shoulders, really. Fantastic. I just love this. And I want to come back to the bigger theme of your earlier work and say, you know, as you look at it now with your own the skills that you have now, the knowledge you have now, the work you're doing with people individually now and seeing the potential for change, what advice would you give for other people who are working in that sector of kind of, you know, interreligious community and connectedness, reduction in hate? What hope, what should they focus on? What hope can you give for this very, very challenging area?
Well, I think the advice I could give for this challenging area and in general is your well-being is absolutely essential before you try to heal the world. Right? Before you try to heal the world, you've got to be grounded. And I say, frankly, that needs time away, reflect. If you can't do time away, reflection, learning, courses like this, even if you don't end up being a therapist, as you said, Mark, will help your mental health in leaps and bounds because they give you markers and indicators of what you can do when your emotions are not feeling well, exploring them, thinking about your thinking, which may be negative. They give you opportunities to make yourself better or feel better.
So your first thing for dear social cohesion entrepreneur, please learn how to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
So, okay, they've done that. Now, what would you, because I kind of want it, I'm kind of asking you to imagine this I'm taking care of myself version that's not quite so pathologically driven. But coming in back into that, what, you know, what, and then and what is it? What to focus on? What is the hope? You know, this person's taking care of themselves now, and they're not doing it this pathologically. They really are wanting to uplift and connect. What's the focus? What's the hope for us in terms of achieving this reduction in hate, this connectedness community?
Well, I would say we must, when we're going through this process, for example, in this sector or any other sector, you must remain authentic to who you are. You must remain authentic. That means what I mean by authentic, you have to be able to voice who and what you are. You need to be able to connect. Look, we as a species, Mark, we discussed this in our breakout groups many times in the course. We as a species are built evolutionary, genetically, societally to connect with each other for survival. Just because we're all safe in our homes over the last 200-300 years does not mean a million years of that connection with others to make us survive has gone away. The minute we disconnect from that is the minute we start to have dis-ease.
So connection, I mean, are we talking, you know, multi-faith youth centers engaged in volunteer projects in the community? What are we talking about? Kind of the sort of things that, because people barreling down into their religious faith in youth centers surely doesn't help.
No, we're not. I'm not even talking. I don't want to see. I don't want to see more identity-driven stuff. I really don't want to see identity-driven stuff, whether it's religion or ideology, leads us to mental inflexibility. What I'm talking about is checking up and engaging with our neighbors, making sure we can talk to the other person down the street. Oh, guess what? He may not have spoken to somebody, but he looks good today. I'm going to say, hey, hi. I've seen you down my road. I think you do, you know, you're doing a good job, or you look great. Talk to people, speak to each other. For God's sake, connect with it. It doesn't matter. Go and do something where you can connect in any way with somebody else.
Well, you've got your audio cut out there, and I want to hear what it was you're saying.
I said that is the reason we're built. That's the whole
connection.
We're biologically built. That's it.
Beautiful. Well, I love you. I love your enthusiasm, and I love, you know, also, this empathy and compassion, and clear also curiosity that you have with your client here, trying to get in their shoes, figure out what's going on, what makes them tick, and hope. Look, we can solve this. We can figure this out together. Love it. Really good. So, that was fabulous. I enjoyed that very much. Let's do something like this again. And thank you, everyone, for your attendance here and allowing us to have this space together, to have this conversation. And we shall do something similar again soon, I hope. Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much.
And Mark, thank you. You made this college happen, and thank you for your energy and effort. We must say that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And just seeing you put this into action makes it all worth it. Fantastic. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Fiyaz. And yes, let's keep this energy going. Fantastic. Good night and sweet dreams. Many blessings.